Oh hey, my name's Parker and I like to make pixel art. There's been a lot of change since I uploaded my first pixel art speedpaint way back in March 2024. The first big change. There's a lot more of you. Thank you to all the people that have watched that video and made it by far my most watched video, and all the subscribers that have come through that video and my other pixel art videos. Thank you, and the comments, everything. Thank you. I appreciate you, and I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get to the point where we're here with another one. But I wanted to make sure I did it right, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't just riding that wave, so to speak, like of attention. I wanted to make sure that that I was delivering something that I was proud of at the end of the day. Otherwise, what's the point? So as you know, I like architecture, I like background art, I like environmental art, all that good stuff. Now, as what you see me working on today is a little cafe building. I do love the New York style of architecture, specifically these old brick multi-story buildings with the shops at the bottom with the apartments up top. Very popular in 90s sitcoms like Friends and Will and Grace and things like that. That's probably where I was exposed to them and grew a love of them. So this is going to be a cafe. At this point, it didn't have an identity. I was still very much carving out what this world would look like. It was an exploration process. Like, we was getting scales sorted, colours sorted, contrast and balance sorted, and all those other things I didn't know. I mean, this was the first building in what would be a bigger scene eventually, and this kind of set the pace for the rest of it. Like, what would everything else around this look like? But to get to that point, we had to carve out from the canvas what this looked like. So this, in a sense, would be, how would you say, like the champion of the design for the street that we're designing. So the colour scheme, nothing was tied down at this point. I just knew I wanted this charming little cafe that you could see on a quaint, somewhat US street, but not necessarily geographically, definitely in the States. I mean, I want to maintain an ambiguity to geography and also time frame. In my head, it's somewhere circa 98 to 2003. So that's kind of dictating what we put in terms of like screens and signage and font choices and color choices and those other kinds of things. So yeah, so what you can see me doing here now is just starting to build up the basis of what the shop front will look like. And I keep changing colors, and I do this a lot in this early stage of the process. In fact, you'll see me do that throughout many things. I'll go back and forth trying to find something, unless I know specifically I'm working with this set color for this set object. I will go back and forth until I find the balance that sits nicely with my eye. And maybe you'll see a color scheme along the way, like you've just seen the pink one and I've changed it to this red one, and you're like, Parker, no, the pink looked much better. And I appreciate that, I really do. Like, everybody's gonna have a slightly different idea of what right is. Now, this is me trying to do some pixel art fonts, which are not something I'm super confident with. And you know what? Looking back at this, it's not awful. I mean, I put the lowercase e in by accident, realised I had to come back, correct that to the uppercase e, and I looked at it, and at the time I hated it. But looking at it now, you know what? I think it's okay. Doesn't make it into the final design. So yeah, that's... Sometimes you just gotta try these things, experiment, see what you do. Just adding some shading into these window vinyls and then trying to find a colour that stops them being so aggressive. I try not to use bright white and pure white and pure black too often. Like, I find them too abrasive. Unless I need a really strong specular highlight or a really, really deep shadow, I am not using them. Specifically in this piece. I don't use them in many pieces, but that is a rule of this art piece, is that pure white and pure black are kind of off the charts. I think I've got a few pixels of each in the whole design, maybe, just in areas where it needed to pop. So we're making curtains, and with these organic shapes, you'll see me carving in and out of them until I've got a shape that I'm happy with, where it feels like that piece of fabric that's draping. And then we just add the shading in. You can see me finally deciding it's a green signage, it's green window frames and door frames. This is where we get to the point where I've made some decisions in my head about what I'm looking at, what I'm working with. And I've decided the door frames are too chunky and it's all just a little bit off balance. So just now rebalancing. Again, this is one of them pieces, looking at it in hindsight, looking back at it while I'm doing this voiceover, I don't hate that top section of that door, and I kind of wish I kept it, and I might go and add that back in because I do feel like it adds a nice bit of character to the door and the build. So that may appear in a later rendition of the street scene. We'll see. So now we're just tidying up these curtains a little bit. You can see I've added the shine for the windows and a slight blue tint for the glaze of the windows. I think when we do interiors looking outwards, the windows will be clear, but exteriors looking inwards, I'm going to add the slight blue tint to the windows. I'm just refining now, just getting everything looking right, getting the windows nicely outlined so they look like they've got a slight frame around them, / shadow, depends what your eye sees. And now we're going to go and work on the upstairs. So this is a balancing exercise now. Is what you're going to see is me figuring out how big these windows are going to be. Now I want 3 windows, and I've got several reference images. I'm not copying any one particular building, but it's one thing I have noticed is on a few of the references I'm looking at is we've got this kind of non-symmetrical kind of layout to the windows. You will very often have a thinner row of windows like that I am assuming is going to be the staircase, the internal staircase of these buildings, and then the larger windows off to the sides of those, which in our case are going to be the apartments above the coffee shop. So I'm just going in, adding the glaze in, adding the shine over the top eventually, just to make it match the bottom. We've put the hint of a blind in, just got the colour right so it pops through, and just varied the heights of them so it doesn't look too boring when the eye lands on it. Change the shine to overlay so it picks up the colours below, so we get a nice hint of like what's beneath there rather than this solid white kind of block. I think it just looks better. Now to give these apartments upstairs their own personality. So this person has got the pink and green. Now to work on the dividers between each floor, which are going to be like rows of bricks. Just going to add in the shadow of the sign just to make it have some depth away from the shop below it. So as I was saying, yeah, these orange divides do become like bricks eventually. I'm just adding griming. I don't want everything to look new. This is a city that's been established a while. Nothing should look too pristine. So just getting the highlights and the shadows in on the individual bricks. Then I go back and add some more individual shading to each unique brick, just to give it a bit of texture. Don't like these rounded caps on the end, so I end up changing those just to a square cap. I think I eventually make those a little bit longer. Pretty sure I do that. We'll find out later in the video. Now it's back to balance again. We need to get the colours balanced. I know I want the rest of the building to be brick, so I've got the colour in for the brick, get the shadows in. Block out the shapes now. We're going to start blocking out the area ready for getting the brick texture on there. And the brick texture, once you get going, comes together surprisingly quickly, really. You're better off choosing an odd number for your brick width so that you get a midpoint for the mortar lines between each brick, and then they just line up nicely. But you'll see how I go through all that. So now I've got the 2 floors in, I can see how big I want the sign to be, and we can start work on the brick texture. Now I got quite lucky and it lines up quite nicely. I did go one off where I wanted to start, but that wasn't a massive problem. We just had to keep backing and forth in it until we kind of got it into a alignment I was happy with. I'm going to add the additional rows. This is what I was saying about making them odd numbers in probably height and width is a good idea if you're dealing with bricks, just to give you that nice even pattern, because the brickwork pattern tends to be quite structured. It doesn't tend to be random, especially in this kind of building and this kind of era of buildings. So I want to try and keep that kind of structure to the brickwork as best as possible. Now I'm just cutting a line around the windows just so that there's less visual disturbance and they have their own little stand. Now I'm not redoing this, so what I do is I take what I've just done and essentially just mash up 2 new layers into 1 new layer at the top, so I don't have to replicate the brickwork. Just a few accessories for the roof now. So this is going to be a little chimney, just trying to get the contrast right, and some shading in there. So this is the chimney cap, spout, I'm not sure what we'd call this bit, but the top part. Just getting the scale nice to the building. Now we're going to add in the randomization just to... So I want it to kind of be wherever the eye falls, there's something to look at. So I went back, looked at reference images and looked at what else I could be putting on the roof of kind of a typical New York City. And these sky boxes, window boxes, I don't know what you call them, like light boxes, seem quite common. I found this nice one that looked like a black leaded kind of affair with opaque windows rather than transparent. So I guess it was purely for light and not for viewing in and out of whatsoever. So that makes me think maybe there'd be a roof garden up here or something in the reference image. Again, just adding random details just to make it so everything sits nicely together. It's all kind of got some flow and blends together nicely, touching up the highlights. Again, I want it to be so no matter where your eye falls on the image, you should be looking at something interesting and unique. There should be a little story being told, a little detail to see. Without overdoing it, I don't want it to look cluttered and messy and like a junkyard. That's not the effect we're going for, but there should be scenes. It's one big scene that's made of many small scenes that are clipped together. And that's the kind of effect we're going for. So now I've just decided I want to put in a little garden box in front of the window. Really simple, just a green square with the kind of dark brown soil. Just playing with some ideas, see what we like, and I decided to go really simple, kind of like daffodil style flowers, daisies, something along that line. Maybe daisies with them being white, though you can get white daffodils, so either would work, I guess. Just adding the shade into those, just so everything's got just a little bit of texture and a little bit of detail. It goes a long way. Now, just for the left side, I decided there is going to eventually be an alleyway here, so the sign's going to hang down over the alleyway to the side of the building. You'll see that well, you've seen it at the beginning, but you'll see it closer at the end when I've finished rendering all of that. So as you can see, it's pink. It does eventually become a green sign. So now I've gone over to the right hand side of the building and decided I want some kind of little outdoor seating area. Now at the back of this cafe there is a conservatory, and you will see that in the interior speed paints when I do those. But to the front there's just these 2 tables with parasols and kind of a brick backdrop to them. So we're just rendering out a fence here. I want it to be kind of, again, I don't want to use white, so everything's this kind of off-whitey cream color with kind of slightly warmer shadows. So now I've got that in, I can just duplicate it for as long as I need. I do actually end up needing more space than this, but it was a good starting point. So there's the brick wall I was talking about, and again, I'm just going to borrow what I can and get those efficient design decisions by reusing. It also helps you create a sense of cohesion between like what is happening in that part of the building and what is happening in this part of the building by duplicating, but we're using it in a different way, so it's just visually more interesting, but it remains cohesive at the same time. You can see by this point I've actually got the branding and the plant and everything sorted on the shop front. We ended up calling it Roses. Rose is a character which you will get to meet very soon in the future speed paint. More upcoming on them. So I did think maybe we'll add some kind of buttress, kind of pillar into this wall. But then I thought maybe once we've got the parasol and the chairs and the posters and all the kind of stuff, it might just be too much. So I decided against these, and these are another thing. I think this is one of the reasons that pixel art takes me so long, because it's a back and forth between do I want this, do I not want that, and kind of figuring out that scene and what it looks like. It's a process. You agitate, and you will find the balance that works for you. And that's the important part. You've got to find the balance that works for you. Don't be thinking, is this right? Is this, if it looks good to you, then it's right. Obviously take criticism and take constructive criticism and always listen to that and try and improve and be a better artist. And I don't feign to ever say that you shouldn't do those things, but you should be the one that looks at your work at the end of the day and goes, I'm happy with that, that looks good to me. And maybe somebody will point something out and it'll change your mind. That's why I like streaming my pixel art, because then I'm not in a vacuum. I can go and ask people who are viewing, very kind people that are viewing, to give me feedback on my pixel art. Anyway, so that brings us pretty much to the end of this speed paint. It's over to the reveal. Thank you for getting this far, I appreciate you.